So let's talk a little bit about this notion of electability. Now, this is something that many people on the left have weighed in on, and they've said the whole notion is nonsense, and we shouldn't even be talking about it, and it really is just, an establishment trick where they take their preferred candidate and they say, hey, this one's the most electable, even though it's not necessarily reflecting in the numbers, but this one's the most electable, so we have to go with this person because they'll beat Trump. Now, they're status quo defenders, and they enjoy business as usual, and they won't change much, but that's okay, because all we care about, thing number one, is we got to defeat Trump, right? So, they're both right and they're wrong, people on the left, when they make this point. I mean, I get what they're saying, however, what I would argue is, instead of saying, hey, the whole notion of electability is bullshit, my argument would be, okay, if you want to have the conversation of electability, let's have the conversation of electability. The straightforward definition of electability is, who is most electable? Who is most likely to beat Trump? Now, we could actually beat them on those grounds. So in other words, when they say, oh, electability is so important and that's why we have to go for a centrist, we should respond, okay, if you think electability is important, let's be clear, no, it's the lefties who are the most electable. So in other words, instead of arguing, this is some advice that I'm giving to people on the left, instead of arguing the whole concept of electability is nonsense, we can say, okay, fine, we'll take your point. Let's have the conversation about electability, but we win on those grounds. The lefties are more electable. So now, this has implications. So what does this mean for the Bernie team? Well, what I would tell the Bernie team is, you should be making the electability argument, because I want it to be a reflexive reaction from people. If you ask people, hey, who's most likely to beat Trump? I want everybody to be like, well, obviously Bernie. So you should make the electability argument, but I would caution and say, don't use polls to make the argument. Why? Very simply, that's an argument that Biden's team can make as of right now as well. So in every poll, Bernie Sanders is beating Donald Trump head-to-head, 100%. However, so is Biden. Now, I think you guys have a similar opinion to me, and I've pointed this out many times. I think that it's largely a smokescreen in terms of Biden. I think that the more he talks, the more those numbers go down. So in that respect, I actually think it's a lot like Hillary Clinton, where she had a lead in the polls most of the time in the election, and she lost. So my fear is that Biden is way too similar to Hillary, and he could lose that lead, okay? But just understand, as of right now, that's my speculation. That's an opinion. So this doesn't hold up in an argument because it's not a strong enough point. So what the Bernie team has to do is make the case that he's the most electable without bringing up the polls. How do you do that? Well, this is the really, really, really important part, okay? What the Bernie team needs to argue is he performs the best in the exact states that Democrats need in order to win. He outflanks Trump on the exact issues that matter most in those states. So, the whole reason Donald Trump won, and anybody who follows politics closely understands this, the whole reason he won the election is the Rust Belt. Rust Belt, Rust Belt, Rust Belt. If he didn't win the Rust Belt so overwhelmingly, then he wouldn't have won the election. So that's the whole game right there. The whole ball game is in the Rust Belt. And, it was like 70,000 votes that put him over the edge. So, it's a very understandable point to make to say, well, you want the Democrat who is safest in the Rust Belt, who's going to be the most electable in the Rust Belt. And that's Bernie by far and away. Why? Because Bernie was out there leading the fight against NAFTA. Bernie was out there leading the fight against the TPP, as Joe Biden was pushing the TPP and supporting NAFTA. Bernie is the strongest pro-union Democrat. Bernie is the strongest anti-corruption Democrat. Bernie is the actual anti-establishment outsider. So when you look at somebody like Joe Biden, the argument for mainstream media is, well, Joe Biden, he has working class appeal. That's what it's the working class appeal. By the way, what they mean is white working class, and that's it. In the case of Bernie, he has working class appeal from people of all races and backgrounds, okay? So he's the actual working class favorite. But more importantly, The reasoning matters. The reasoning matters. And in the case of Bernie, on all of those key policy issues that really turn the race over to Trump, he outflanks Trump and beats him at his own game. Now, just to be clear, this is not me saying, hey, there are no TFGs who supported Trump. In other words, I'm not saying it only comes down to economic anxiety. Obviously, there are many reasons different people voted for Trump. It's not like Richard Spencer voted for Donald Trump and supported Donald Trump because he was being against free trade and in favor of working people, in favor of protections for them. That's not why Richard Spencer supported him. Richard Spencer supported him because he made the comments that, Mexico's not sending their best. They're criminals. They're rapists. I assume some are good people. We need a total and complete shutdown of Muslims coming into this country. Like, that's the reason why a guy like Richard Spencer would support him. So I'm not trying to say that, all of the support for Trump is purely economic related. But what I am saying is, and this is proven, the support that got him over the edge in the places that mattered the most in the election, in the Rust Belt, that is a big part of it there. That is a big part of it there. Polls also show those people support populist Democrats over Republicans. But they had the choice of a fake populist Republican and a non-populist Democrat in the last election, and they went with the Republican. So, but again, I wouldn't bring up the polls when I'm the Bernie team and I'm making this argument. But what I would say nonstop until the cows come home is Bernie Sanders is the strongest Rust Belt Democrat possible. If you couldn't create a Democrat in a lab that's better for the Rust Belt than Bernie Sanders. Again, TPP, NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, unions, anti-corruption, anti-establishment, outsider, history of fighting for these people on the issues they care most about. He's a lock in those areas. A lock. Whereas Biden is almost uniquely weak, just as weak as Hillary, because what's Trump going to do? Same old tap dance. He supported NAFTA. He was trying to push the TPP that would have destroyed jobs. And what's Biden's response going to be? He's going to probably call the debate moderator his kid's name and trip up and call Donald Trump Richard Nixon or something because his brain is melting and dripping out of his ears. So I just don't... In other words, the concept of electability, while some argue it's total bullshit, no, we could have a conversation about who's most electable and why, but the left is going to win that conversation 10 out of 10 times. Because it's true. On all of those most important issues that really put Trump over the edge in the Rust Belt, those are the issues where Bernie most severely routs Donald Trump. What's he going to say? I'm more populist, I'm more of an outsider than Bernie? I'm better for working people? And also, Bernie's the only one who can bring up the facts because he knows them. He knows that 93,000 jobs are outsourced under Trump. He knows the numbers on income and wealth inequality. He knows how tough working people have it. He knows that half of workers in this country make $30,000 a year or less. He knows 76% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Biden doesn't even know those facts. Biden's more likely to make the argument, the economy is actually great, but thank Obama for that or something. So make the electability argument, but come correct. You don't have to bring up the polls. Bring up the region of the country that's most important in the election and how Bernie beats Trump on all of the important issues to those people in that region.